It may look like I'm decorating for Christmas in July, but we're going to use these stringed lights as point light sources to go over a property called bokeh. Hey fellow photographers, what did you shoot today? So what is bokeh? Bokeh is just a term that refers to the aesthetic quality of the out of focus blurry spots in an image. Now remember, when we talked about our lens diagrams, we talked about aperture and the pinhole camera, light gets focused to a point, but things that are out of focus actually show up as blurs, and that's what bokeh is. Now this bokeh can take on different properties depending on what lenses you use and what apertures you have. Just as an example, if I move over to the side here and I try and get the camera to focus on my hand instead of the lights behind me, you see that they'll start to go blurry as my hand becomes in focus, and then as it returns, those point light sources will become more sharp. So what does this mean for your pictures? Well, the blurry spots in your photos, especially point light sources, are going to take the form of whatever the shape of your aperture is. So most, if not all, lenses when shot wide open are going to produce a circular aperture. The widest opening is usually a circle, and it's going to produce circle out of focus areas on your pictures. However, different lenses have different number of aperture blades, and the number of blades is going to determine the shape of those out of focus areas. In addition, some lenses have curved aperture blades that are designed to give you a more circular look instead of angular aperture blades, which are more straight edged. So to see this in action, what I've done is I've taken my digital camera and I've attached a variety of lenses to it and taken pictures of these point light sources. So the first lens I used is this Hasselblad 50mm lens adapted to Canon EOS mount, and this lens has 5 aperture blades, which means that it's going to form a pentagon when the aperture blades are closed down. Now, wide open, here's what the shot looks like. You get that nice circular aperture, but stop down just one stop from f4 to f5.6 gives these. And like I said, the shape of the aperture blade is going to determine the shape of the out of focus areas. So next up, we have this Rokinon 85mm lens, and it has actually T-stops instead of f-stops, which we'll save for another video. But for now, they're very similar. So wide open, this is T1.5, and if we close it down a little bit, this has 8 aperture blades. So because it has 8 aperture blades, we're going to see something that resembles an octagon. Of course, we've got to bring back this guy, one of my favorite lenses, the Petzval lens, because this one, if you remember, it has those Waterhouse stops, right? So those apertures actually drop in to this lens. So the normal aperture for this is circular, but you can buy additional ones that have really fun shapes. So for example, here is a hexagon, and here is a water droplet. Now, something about this one, right, this little teardrop shape, the fact is that it's an asymmetric design, right? So it depends where this is in the lens, and it goes back to what we talked about in our lens diagrams. So imagine that light is crossing over in your lens, right? So we have the focusing light and it's being projected onto our film or image sensor. So the light rays go like this. Depending on where I put that aperture stop in that lens, right? If it's this way, the image will be reversed. But if I put it back here, the image is already flipped before it hits this, so it's going to be the opposite direction. So that's actually an interesting property of this lens. If I have it focused to infinity, I get the teardrop sort of upside down. Whereas if I had close focus, I get the teardrop what we might consider the correct side up. So it's definitely something to take in consideration when it comes to where you put your focus or what aesthetic you're going for when you have asymmetrical designs. So here are a few more fun shapes. A star, some snowflakes, X's, butterflies, and the rebel sign from Star Wars. So really the possibilities are endless when it comes to that lens, because you can actually physically change the exact shape of the aperture with whatever picture you want to take. Very unique. But what about modern lenses? So modern lenses like this Canon L series lens, wide angle lens, they do something interesting. So these blades, aperture blades, are very, very curved, and honestly, as the next pictures will show, will start wide open and it will stop down in increments, and you can see that you almost see no change in shape. Now, I know from the specs of this lens that this lens is a 9-bladed aperture, and really, when it comes to the wider apertures, the curved blades do a really good job of not showing the edges. And that's an aesthetic that a lot of people go for. You don't want to see necessarily, why are there hexagons or why are there pentagons in the back of your picture? It can be a little distracting. So honestly, most of our equations about aperture and lens design are based off of circular apertures, and you get the least diffraction when you don't have hard edges on your lenses. So manufacturers of modern lenses generally strive to make curved aperture blades, but it's a good point to know, and something you might want to think about, the number of aperture blades and whether or not they're curved when you're purchasing your next lens. Now, does that mean that more aperture blades are better? Not necessarily, but more aperture blades will get you a smoother, more circular aperture opening. The more blades you have, the closer you can approximate a circle, especially if they're curved. If they're curved, then they're definitely going to approximate a circle better, and that's going to help with things like diffraction and give you a nice sort of circular background bokeh that isn't going to distract from your images. But like I said, you can use things like this Petzval lens to get very creative. And we're going to talk about some DIY ways to get very creative with the aperture for an aesthetic effect. So I hope that was a quick, fun, and informative little video about the out of focus blur, the bokeh in the back of your pictures. It's really exaggerated when it comes to point light sources. So really when it comes to the out of focus blur in your images, you're not going to see circles all the time. But sharp point light sources will turn out that way. Something to keep in mind. As we continue to see, aperture plays such a large role in the aesthetics of our photographs. And we have a lot more to talk about: f-stops versus t-stops, how to make your own creative apertures. The list goes on and on. If you haven't done so already and you find these videos fun and informative, please consider subscribing to this channel and enabling notifications so that you know when new videos come out. They're usually every week, but sometimes life gets in the way. We've got lots more to talk about, and I'm curious to see what you want to hear about and learn about when it comes to photography. So leave your comments and suggestions down below. And as always, until next time, happy shooting.